we shall discuss the third book, that is the Metaphysical Poetry, book 3. So yesterday we had a discussion on Spencer, Edmund Spencer, and the next page of British poetry is coming under the metaphysical group of poets. So you may be developing a question in your mind, that what is metaphysical, and why are they called metaphysical group of poets, and to which period do they belong? So let me tell you, let me explain you at the very beginning about the term metaphysical. So it is a term that was coined by the critic Dr. Samuel Johnson. The poets, whom we call the metaphysical poets, they did not claim themselves to be termed as a metaphysical. You'll be surprised to know that they did not know each other. They did not know one another, and they did not even know that they are designated as metaphysical poets, because much later, from their deaths, you may say, they were termed as a metaphysical. During 19th century, the term metaphysical was coined by critic Dr. Samuel Johnson, and he described those poets after 200 years that they were a loose group of 17th century English poets whose work was characterized by the inventive use of conceit. Let me repeat the term. Their works were characterized by, the very important characterization of the metaphysical poetry was the inventive use of conceit. They invented a new literary technique in their poetic quality that was called conceit. You cannot omit this word conceit, CONCEIT. When you are answering for metaphysical poet, if you are not mentioning this word conceit, your answer is totally incomplete. So why did Dr. Samuel Johnson describe the group of poets as a loose group? Why were they loose group? Because they did not have any contact with one another. So they were scattered, a loose group. And they were made a group by Dr. Samuel Johnson after 200 years. They belong to 17th century. The term metaphysical was coined in 19th century, at the end of 19th century. And the most important characterization, the most important characteristic that Dr. Johnson discovered in them was the invention of something very new, innovative, something very new, that was conceit. And you can very well get what is conceit in your book 3 in page number 52. Please note it. In your page number 52, I will of course explain what is conceit, but that is in your page number 52. So I think I have given you the very origin of the word metaphysical. That the word was coined by Dr. Samuel Johnson, okay, to make a group of some poets of 17th century whose work were characterized by the inventive use of conceit. So what was that conceit? The conceit was, we shall discuss it later on, but for your understanding, just I am introducing that conceit. It was a use of imagery with forceful explanation. Use of imagery with forceful explanation to display their intellectual ability. So what is that image and what is that forceful explanation? Just let me tell you, when you come to literature and you use the term image, what we suppose you see your image in the mirror, then that is not the image in literature. The image is a figure of speech, or it is a literary technique What means simply, if you simply say, then it is word picture. Word picture. I mean, to present uh, some picture by using words. So you just, I'm giving an example. Suppose I tell you a sentence: a dog jumped over the fence. If I tell you the sentence, a dog jumped over the fence, dear learners, a picture is created in your mind. So if I'm a good painter, I can make a painting of this. I can make a painting of a fence and the painting of a dog. The dog is jumping over the fence. So that kind of a painting is created in your mind by using some words. So image is a word picture. A picture will be created in your mind by the use of the words. So this is called image. So this image was used by the metaphysical group of words forcefully. I mean, those images, what they created. Suppose I tell you a sentence: a dog is flying in the sky. This is not an image. It cannot be an image because a dog cannot fly. You know it very well. A dog can jump over the boundary, or a dog can jump over the fence. This can be an image. So if I say a dog is flying in the sky, then this is a forceful use of imagery. So when I'm using this sentence, suppose a dog is flying in the sky, that it's forceful, it is inventive, but I have to explain it with proper rational justification, and that they did in their poems. So when they did it, that is because of the literary, intellectual, cultural influence of the age that we shall discuss later on. So I have just introduced to something conceit. That conceit is the forceful explanation of an imagery. We shall come into detail later on. Then, uh,
Good morning, sir.
good morning, very good morning.
Good
Then,
morning, sir.
yes,
Sir, which blog is running now?
third block,
Which
third block,
third blog?
third third block.
How
Okay.
page number, sir?
I have just started it. I am giving you
Okay,
the
sir. Thank you.
giving you the introduction of metaphysical poets. Okay. Now,
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir,
hmm,
sir, can I say that epithalamion triggers sexual imagery
yes,
using
yes,
the word imagery?
yes, imagery is there. Imagery is there.
Okay,
Imagery,
thank you, sir.
yes, imagery is what picture. Okay, I will come to later on 1 second. Okay. Now, we got the term metaphysical. It was an inventive one. It was a new one introduced by Dr. Johnson. Then, so if they used conceit with forceful imagery, then what was their intention? The intention of those metaphysical poets was to give emphasis on their intellectual ability. They were very much interested to show their intellectual capabilities rather than the lyrical quality of the poet of the verse. They were not interested for the lyrical quality. So it can be of a very simple manner, it can iambic pentameter, iambic hexameter, like that. But the most important thing of metaphysical poetry is the theme, the imagery. What kind of images, what kind of examples they are incorporating in their poem. That is important. And the examples were chosen from, taken from their intellectual exploration of the contemporary society. So they were some type of competitors to show their knowledge. Even they did not know one another. They were very much emphasizing on the focus of their intellectual exposition through their poetry. So, when Dr. Johnson coined the word metaphysical group of poets, that where do we find it? How can you know that Dr. Johnson did it? Dr. Johnson has written a book. The name of the book is Lives of the Most Eminent English Poets. I'm repeating the name of the book, Lives of the Most Eminent English Poets, written in 1781. And there is a chapter. The chapter is Abraham Cowley. Abraham Cowley is also one of the metaphysical poets. So, in that particular chapter of Lives of Most Eminent English Poets, for the first time, Dr. Johnson used a word metaphysical for this group of poets. And he refers to those poets in this way. that they are a race of writers. And he coined the term metaphysical for them. So they are a race of writers. It did not say they are a group of writers or they are a genre of writers. Genre, genre means literary trend. So metaphysical is not a genre. It is not a it is not a literary trend. Rather, it is a race. Means after them, the metaphysical technique ended. But when you come to Spencer, when you come to in romantics later on, when you come to Victorians, when you come to modern poets, then their trend was continued by the latter group of poets to some extent or somewhere. But metaphysical technique is never followed by the poets in the latter ages. So they were something unique, and they tried their level best to justify their intellectual show in their poems. They wanted to justify their use of metaphor or their use of imagery is rational, is genuine. So metaphysical is not a genre like romantic poet or Victorian poet or modern poet or restoration poet like that. So it was a race. Very much. This is a difference. Why it is a race? Just I told you, it is a race because it is not a genre because genre means a literary trend which is followed in the later ages also to some extent, sometimes more, sometimes less. But metaphysical poets are never repeated or never followed or never copied or never emulated by any of the poets. So they are a race of poets. So it is surprised to find that the main poets of the group they did not know each other. They even did not show each other's work, and they did not know that they are even a part of a classification till their death. They did not know that they were even a part of a classification that was further discovered by Dr. Johnson after 200 years, and he coined them as metaphysical. So it is purely a personal term used by Dr. Johnson for the group of poets. So why Dr. Johnson coined the term like that? Why did he call them metaphysical? Why not something different? Because metaphysical, as he analyzes, metaphysical, what he says, that metaphysical is a distinctive school of thought. They are a distinctive school, they are an exclusive school, and they were having a particular type of thought. So, dear learners, let me explain you in very simple word what exactly metaphysical mean. Meta, meta means beyond, and physical means the physical world, or what we say, the ordinary world. So we are living in the physical world or the ordinary world. So what is now metaphysical means beyond the physical world. So when something is written, when the subject matter is written beyond the physical world, then it was something different from the traditional or the traditional way of thoughts made by the earlier group of poets. And it is not even followed by the latter group of poets. They were something different, they were something extraordinary, they were something distinctive, or they were something unique. So, in what way they were different from the ordinary world? So, what they thought, what they wrote, what they displayed, or what they incorporated, what they intellectually explained, that was beyond the ordinariness, or that was beyond the physical world, that was beyond the common thought of a common human being. So they had a they had a different type of they had an exclusive intellectual exploration to look into the matters of their age, because I have told you in the previous class that when we discuss a poet or when we discuss any poem, then we have to see the historical background, the cultural background, the intellectual background, because the poet is a product of all those things. So, what was the reason that the metaphysical group of poets, they sought for such kind of poems, not the poems written by the earlier group of poets like Spencer and others. So their extraordinariness was to expose, as I have already told you, their extraordinariness was to expose their intellect before the readers by using conceit. So conceit was their main weapon. So you can find a conceit used by a particular metaphysical poet like John Donne. You can also find conceit in the poem of Andrew Marvell, or you can find conceit in George Herbert. So in their own ways, they have observed the world, they have observed the phenomenal world, and they have discovered something, and in their own interpretation, they have used the conceits and they have explained it, and that is the uniqueness. So when you discuss a metaphysical poem, you have to find out with what intention or with what note or with what intellectual ability the poet has rendered the idea of conceit in the poem. So,
Sir,
yes,
if is it conceit, that conceit means it contains metaphor, similes like things.
yes, conceit can be image, conceit can be metaphysical, conceit can be simile, but the simile is very odd type of simile, odd type of metaphor.
Okay.
Normally, you will not find all these things in the other group of words. So, in a very simple way, you can say that it is the use of witty and ingenious analogies. Witty and ingenious analogies,
Genius.
very witty. They were intellectual, so they were using their witty and ingenious analogies in their poems. So when they took any metaphor, when they took any symbol, when they took any image, then they were very much careful that how the explanation or how the, I mean, decoding of the images will be different, totally exclusive from the other group of words. So if you want to find the definition, if you go to the definition of conceit, then it has been explained. It has been explained by some of the critics that conceit is the heterogeneous ideas violently yoked together. In one of the critics has mentioned conceit as the heterogeneous ideas violently yoked together. Heterogeneous ideas means different ideas, multiple number of ideas. The multiple number of ideas are violently yoked. They are not mildly yoked. Yoked means combined or confused or juxtaposed. They were violently yoked together. So this violent is the forceful use, jabardast, forceful use by the metaphysical group of words. They will not listen to anybody. Whatever they think to be justified. So what do you find in their conceit? You can very much find the unnaturalness of the use of knowledge, intricacy, I mean complicated thoughts, complexity in their explanation, and that is their thoughts. So in conceit, you will find the thoughts incorporated are unnatural, intricate, and complex. It is not easy to understand unless we have sufficient knowledge on the background of that particular age. And this post explanation of image is sometimes with hyperbolic expressions. So when they use this forceful explanation, I mean violently yoked heterogeneous ideas together, then they create images. And some of the one of the learners just recently told that it can be a symbol. Yes, it can be symbol. Yes, it can be image. Yes, it can be metaphor. And sometimes they use the hyperbolic expressions. Also, dear learners, so I think it will be my pleasure to introduce before you that what exactly is the difference between image, metaphor, and symbol, so that we can have the idea of the difference between all these things. And so I was just giving an example of image just 10, 20, 15 minutes before that a dog jumped over the fence. So when it created a picture in your mind, then this was an image, as I told you. So image is a word picture, and in this particular sentence, a dog jumped over the fence. You pick up the word dog. So if first of all, a picture is created in your mind, everybody's mind, if you are sensible, if you are aware, and a dog that comes into your mind is a dog. The dog may be brown in somebody's mind, the dog may be white in somebody's mind, the dog may be black in somebody's mind, but it is an animal dog. Dog means your dog. So in an image is what it is. Means dog is a dog. But I am giving another example that dirty dog stole away my purse. That dirty dog stole away my purse. So, dear learners, do you find any image of animal or dog in your mind in this particular sentence? I think you cannot. The dirty dog stole away my purse. So when your purse is stolen away and you are scolding someone as dirty dog, then here the picture of a dog that comes to your mind is totally different from the earlier sentence. The dog jumped over the boundary or jumped over the fence. So here dog is not what it is. It is something other than dog. And that is a human being, of course. You are scolding someone. So this is what is a metaphor. So metaphor is an indirect comparison between two objects for a particular characteristics, and the characteristics here is the lunacy, to loot, to take away, to steal or something like that. So you are, I mean, definitely telling a person dog here. So this is an image. This is a metaphor.
Sir, please repeat
Okay,
it.
which one?
Yeah,
Which one?
metaphor, sir.
Metaphor. Okay. So you are clear
Yes,
about imagery. You are clear?
yes, sir.
Sir, one second, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes. Yes.
One second. That explain about the imagery, please.
Okay. So again, let me repeat that. Let me tell a sentence to you that a dog jumped over the fence. So when I tell you the sentence, a dog jumped over the fence, then a picture of dog comes to your mind. The picture of dog, the color of dog may be
Yes,
different in different minds, but here
yes,
dog is a dog. So
yes, sir.
imagery is what you are describing. Imagery is what you are describing is it is. But when you come to metaphor, that the dirty dog stole away my purse. In this particular sentence, the dog is not at all a dog. It cannot be a dog. It is a human being. So you are comparing a human being with a dirty dog because you are scolding that person. It's because he has stolen away your purse. So here dog is not a dog. But why the person is becoming a dog? Because you are comparing some quality. So in a metaphor, an indirect comparison is there, and the thing is not what it is. Suppose you say someone you are a donkey. When you say someone you are a donkey, means you are a foolish one. But the person cannot be a donkey, cannot be an animal. But when you say donkey is grazing in the field, then there is a donkey animal. So a donkey is grazing in the field is an image, and you are a donkey is a metaphor. Is it clear
So
or not?
yes, sir. In imaginary, we in our mind a real picture is
Yes.
depicted, and
Yeah,
in the metaphor there is no any that real picture.
yes, it is a comparison.
Yes,
It is a
comparison
comparison.
only. Okay, sir. Thank
Okay.
you.
So when we find the conceit, when we find the forceful explanations of the metaphysical group of poets, they combine different ideas from their intellectual store of knowledge, and they unnaturally they want to forcefully explain it, and sometimes they become so hyperbolic. So I will explain what is hyperbolic. They become so hyperbolic in their expression that it is very difficult to digest for a reader, but we have to accept them because they are explaining it. So what is that hyperbole? It has come from the word hyperbole. Hyperbole, Hyperbole. Hyperbole. Hyperbole is a poetic exaggeration. Exaggeration, Exaggeration. In Odia, it is Atiranjit Kariba. Atiranjit. So when you say something bigger than what it is exaggeration. So when 6 is 6, but when we are presenting 6 as 60 or 6 as 16, then it is hyperbole. So let me give you a very small example that in one of the poems of William Wordsworth, the poem is Prelude. The poem is Daffodils. So in that poem, particular poem, Wordsworth is visiting to the side of a lake and is finding some daffodil flowers blooming on the bank of the lake. So he is using a sentence there, 10,000s or so I saw at a glance. So when this particular sentence is there, 10,000s or so I saw at a glance. So look at the word 10,000s. 10,000 means this is he did not count the flowers. So the flowers were in lakhs. The flower, but he is using the word 10,000. Sometimes what happens when suppose you visit my garden and you see I have planted about 60, 70 varieties of flowers in my garden, and you say, sir, you have planted the flowers, the entire flower. Sometimes in Odia also you say, sir, apan dunya sara gacha lagaichhanti. So dunya sara or of the entire world, I cannot accommodate them in my garden. I have planted just 60 to 70 or 45 plants, but you are saying dunya sara. So this is a kind of exaggeration, means too much. So in that particular sentence, 10,000s or so I saw at a glance, it is not 10,000, it is more than that. So when you are exaggerating something for the purpose of your poetic articulation, then it is called hyperbole. I mean to say something much bigger than what it really is. That is what is hyperbole. We call in poem hyperbole. So sometimes you will find the conceit used by the metaphysical poets are very much hyperbolic in expressions. Means you will see that it should not be like that. And I will bring an example of it at the end of the session today. That what is that hyperbolic expression? So may I just after I give you a general introduction, I will touch some of the poems of metaphysical poets, and there we shall discuss conceit, we shall discuss hyperbolic expression, and we shall discuss image, we shall discuss metaphor also. Okay, so so far as we have made our discussion, then what we have found is there are three or four main points. The first point is that the term metaphysical was coined by the critic Dr. Samuel Johnson, okay, in his book, The Eminent English Poets. The second thing is that the metaphysical group of poets use conceit in their poem. And what is conceit? Conceit is the use of witty and heterogeneous ideas violently yoked. And they use it forcefully, hyperbolic, and with proper explanation. Okay.
Sir, please tell me the spelling of conceit.
CONCEIT.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Conceit. Okay. So and the next thing is that why we call them metaphysical. Meta means beyond, physical means physical world, or in a very common sense, ordinariness. So they were beyond ordinariness. They were extraordinary. And the fourth point is that they were not a genre. Genre means a literary trend, which is followed by the next generation. So they are not a genre, they are a race. Means they begin there and they end there. So they don't have any followers because they are something very unique and odd. But their very purpose was to expose their knowledge. I think these 4 or 5 points are clear to all of you. What is exactly mean by metaphysical? Then I'm coming to the history, cultural or intellectual background of the poem. The poets of that age, they intended for writing such type of poems. Why not other types of poems? So let us have a look at the historical or cultural background of 17th century, which was the period of the metaphysical group of poets. Don't say metaphysical poet, metaphysical group of poets always. So it was 17th century was
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, the last one, they are not a genre means?
Genre, genre.
It's
It is a French word. We sometimes pronounce it as also genre. But for our Indian pronunciation, it is genre. Genre, genre. Genre means a literary trend, a literary style which is followed by the other group of poets. Suppose you are writing a poem today and you are following some literary technique, then it is a genre. But why metaphysical poets are not a genre? They are a race because their technique was so complicated. They're just those so forceful that the poet in the latter age they did not want to follow them. They did not like follow them. So they were not a genre. Is it clear?
Actually, sir, they are, in other words, we can say they are unique from others.
Definitely, they're unique. Each age is unique, but the in other ages there are the followers are there. The techniques of those poets were followed by the next generation somehow, more or less. But metaphysical group of poets, their technique was absolutely dropped then and there. The people did not follow them. The other poets did not follow them, so they were not a genre.
Yes. Who coined the metaphysical?
It is I have told you it is Dr. Samuel Johnson. Dr. Samuel Johnson. Okay, Dr. Samuel Johnson coined the term metaphysical in his book. The name of the book I have given you, Lives of the Most Eminent English Poets, written in 1781. Lives of the Most Eminent English Poets. So that is there.
Hello.
Any doubt? Okay.
Sir, yesterday, as you said that Geoffrey Chaucer and Edmund Spenser, they are from Middle English period time. Then today, as you discussed about Samuel Johnson and John Donne, they are from which period?
No, Samuel Johnson is not from this period. Samuel, you see, metaphysical group of poets, they wrote their poems, then they died. Okay. Now they did not say that we are metaphysicals. It was later on, after 100 years and more, a critic was there, Dr. Johnson, who observed their poems and he found that these poems are something totally different from Spenser and different from the other poets. So he coined the term metaphysical for them. Why? Why he coined metaphysical? Because he found that their poems were not beyond physical, beyond ordinariness. It was extraordinary. So that is why he called them metaphysical. So Dr. Johnson belongs to 18th century later on, but he observed the poems written before his age and he coined the term metaphysical. That was the point. What is your doubt? Okay. So now the question is, why did they compose such kind of poems? Because in my previous class, I think I have given you a note or a shortcut idea about different ages of English poetry, and I have told you that in the Renaissance period, Renaissance period is divided into 4 phases. Renaissance period is from 1500 to 1660, and within that we find that there is Elizabethan age, Jacobean age, Caroline age, Commonwealth period in different stages. So in this Renaissance period, the metaphysical group of poets are coming at the latter stage, at the ending part, before the neoclassical period. So we find that the background of I'm talking about 17th century. Okay, so 17th century means 1600 something always. So in that period, in 17th century, what was the condition of England so far as socio-political economic affairs were concerned? Then it was a period of great development, because in the previous period of Spenser, you find there was awakening, Renaissance was there. So that Renaissance spirit continued, and you find here the period of great development, great upheavals in social, political, religious, and importantly, two important things, philosophical and scientific activities. So these philosophical and scientific activities, they found a new dimension, they found a new upheaval during the 17th century, which is actually the hallmark of metaphysical poets. Philosophical and scientific development, including social, political, and religious development also, because this was the continuity of the earlier Renaissance spirit. And by that time, in England, King James was there, who translated the Bible. I told you in the previous class. So King James was a very, learned king, and he was a good arbitrator. Arbitrator, you Arbitrator. Arbitrator means a good judge who can decide what is right and what is wrong. So that is why in the 17th century, during the rule of King James, we find many issues, several political issues, several religious issues, several social issues were very properly arbitrated or adjudged by the king, and they were settled. So England was developing, England was, growing into a very, it was a very new page, new direction. And at that time, after King James, you find his son, King Charles I, accessing the throne. The accession of throne by King Charles I, the son of King James, in 1625, 1620, 17th century, 1625 was propitious to increase in aesthetic activities. So his father, King James, had settled most of the political issues, social issues, religious issues. There was a kind of settlement in all respect. But so when Charles first came, he was a man of aesthetic activities. Aesthetic means artistic, what you say. In art, painting comes, literature comes, poem comes, everything comes. So he was a man of aesthetic activities, and he gave much more emphasis to that, the literary development of the time. And the, another important point is that during the reign of Charles I, the mannerism of the people was taken to be an important aspect of lifestyle. So what is mannerism? Mannerism is good manner, bad manner, you say. The mannerism is the sum total of our behavior in our speech, in our activities, and in our habitual trait. So mannerism is the sum total of our behavior, our speech, our habitual trait, including even our dress or our presentation, in the how we present ourselves in the society, how a person is treated by others in the society from all respect, from the speech, from the appearance, from the dress code, from the behavior, from the knowledge, from every respect. So the poets of this period also, they wanted to show their mannerism or their wit or their intellect or their knowledge through their poems, because this was a period in which mannerism was given much more importance in the society than other things. So how can you improve your manner? How can we refine our manner? We can refine our manner obviously by our social interaction, by our political awareness, by our intellectual awareness, and by our awareness of knowledge of contemporary affairs of the society. So that kind of a refinement can come to the personality or come to a person through, not immediately, but gradually. So, dear learners, I will give you a word here for the refinement of mannerism, uh, of a word called Baroque. Baroque, Baroque. If you look at your book, page number 12, you can find that word Baroque, Baroque poets or Baroque poets. So from where that word Baroque came? Baroque is a Spanish or Portuguese name. Spanish and Portuguese name for a pearl, 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 mukta, pearl. Okay, for a pearl. And that pearl is very rough and irregular in shape or size. So, but that is very costly. So, you know how an irregular or a rough stone or pearl can be uh, polished. It can be polished by using some technique. So similarly, the mannerism of a person, can be polished, can be refined like Baroque. So the artists are there, the people are there who can make that Baroque into a very shape, into a very polished and attractive pearl. Similarly, we can refine our mannerism, we can refine our behavior by our interaction with the society. So the metaphysical group of, there are a group of poets, metaphysical group of poets who are also called Baroque poets because they also refine their mannerism. They give emphasis on the mannerism of the people, like the Baroque, like that pearl, which is brought into a very polished, dazzling, and very costly, precious stone by bringing it from, or restoring it from a very irregular and rough shape. So that Baroque technique was used in poetry during the metaphysical age. I think I have given you some idea about Baroque. That is the gradual refinement in our behavior. Then the next point that we find in the metaphysical group of poet is the emergence of, in 17th century, the emergence of empirical science. Science is always there. From the very beginning of civilization, science is there. So when man invented a wheel, that was also science. So, but in 17th century, when you go to the history of British literature, British period or European history, then you find there was the emergence or there was the beginning of empirical science. So what is that empirical science? Empirical science means the science of reason. Reason, why it is happening and how it is happening. You have to prove your statement with through experiment, because experiment is necessary. So when earlier what was happening, when in the earlier scientific theories, only the statements were given, only the opinions were given, but they were not sufficiently supported by any experimentation, or they are not supported by any, proof. So science became experimental, science became empirical from theoretical. You know that when Ptolemy had told about the geocentric Earth, that Earth is in the middle and Sun is revolving. Nobody has asked any question. But when in 17th century, any scientific fact, any scientific statement, any scientific idea, any scientific opinion were stated or presented before the public, then they challenged it. They challenged it and they demanded for the experimentation of it. So in that situation, we find that science challenged the faith of the medieval world. It's very, very important. Science challenged the faith of the medieval world. What is that faith of the medieval world? Let me say you that uh, God has created the universe, or God has created the human being. So it was a long-term belief that God has created the human beings, or God has created the earth. But who has proved it? It has not been proved. So it was a medieval idea, and because there was no proof, people developed suspicion on that. People developed doubt on that. Is there any proof that God has created the human beings, or God has created the earth? So when new scientific theory came in 17th century for the first time, we find here for every region, the new ideas were very much supported by the scientific experiments. And so in that case, the on the earlier ideas, on the earlier notions, the people developed their doubts, developed their suspicions. So there was a challenge, and that challenge took place between science versus the medieval belief of the people. Uh, and that was very well that can be found in the, as I was telling you, in the astronomical revolution of the Earth, that the exponents of the heliocentric theory, because I was telling in the previous class that Ptolemaic system was believing on the geocentric theory. Geo means Earth. Earth is at the center and Sun is moving. But we find here in the later stages that the exponents like Copernicus, the exponent like Kepler, the exponent like Galileo. Copernicus was from 1473 to 1543, and followed by Kepler, William Kepler, from 1571 to 1630, and again we find Galileo from 1564 to 1642, 17th century. They very much established the fact that Earth is not, the solar system is not at all geocentric, it is heliocentric, and for which Galileo was imprisoned and he died in the jail, but later on it was proved. So the new ideas with proof and Galileo's telescope and Galileo's dropping of the ball from the Pisa, the Tower of Pisa, all those, they were the proofs because that was scientific truths. So scientific emergence of empirical science, emergence of experimental science, that gave a new dimension even to the poetic techniques of those age. So you find a lot of scientific ideas. We shall see. I will give you some examples of how these scientific ideas, how these things are very much incorporated in the metaphysical group of poets. Though they were not followed by the later group of poets, still they have tried their level best to show all these things. Then, dear learners, I will take the name of another important person of the period, 17th century, that all of you know, that he was Sir Isaac Newton. And Newton's laws, Newton's theory of laws of gravitation, Newton's principle, and all that, you find that Sir Isaac Newton, whose life was between 1642 to 1727, 1642 to 1727, he supported the theory of, heliocentric idea given by Galileo or Copernicus and Kepler, because Newton also supported the heliocentric theory by giving the theory of the law of gravitation. So we find these spectacular advertisements of scientific theories, scientific knowledge, and scientific experimentation were very much there in the poetry of that period. But here comes an important question, that Sir Isaac Newton was a scientist. And as I told you, empirical science was the base of that age. What you are saying, what you are scientifically nurturing, you have to prove it. You have to make it rational. So when Newton was a scientist and he proved the law of gravitation by his three laws, in spite of that, Newton was a regular goer to the church of England. So when Newton regularly visited church, that means he had the faith in the religious ideas. So he was a scientist of the empirical science. At the same time, he was a regular visitor to the church. Was believing in the spiritual quality of the God. So in that case, how can the people accept between these two, whether God is right, the creation of the earth by the God is right, or the creation of the earth or the creation of the human being by some other evolutionary process is right? That created the confusion. So in the latter age, you find that there was a confusion, that the confusion emerged in the mind of the people in the latter ages, a period of chaos and confusion between science and religion. So that was an idea very much started during the time of 17th century, because science did not approve everything of the medieval belief, but scientists did not discard the medieval belief entirely. So there was a combination of both these two, the combination of scientific ideas and the spiritual belief or the religious belief. And one more important person who is also contributing his genius to the development of English literature, and he is none other than Sir Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon is one of the most famous English essayists. In his famous book, Advancement of Learning, written in 1705, Advancement of Learning, written in 1705, he has very much explained the same theory of that inductive method of science. Inductive method of science. That what is that inductive method of science? The rational or logical method of science. Dear learners, I have already told you that science was based on experimentation. So when Sir Francis Bacon wrote his essay was very much inductive in thought. I mean, rational in thought. He had different chapters like on faith, on lies, on marriage, on every issue of the society. He wrote his essays, and he very much expounded that the inductive method of science and that essays that advancement of learning, the book Advancement of Learning, and the essays of Sir Francis Bacon, that was that was having such influence in the society that it boosted to the establishment of Royal Society in London. The Royal Society in London is that was established in 28th November 1660. Royal Society of England, London, established in 28th November 1660, and that was it is still today, and that was a learned society to improve natural knowledge, promoting science and its benefit to the people. The Royal Society of London was established as a learned society to improve natural knowledge for the promotion of science and its benefits to the people. So in the scientific way, we find a lot of new dimensional activities that emerged in English literature. So they had the tremendous influence in English literature, particularly the English poets of those days. Because during this period, you can also find drama. So when you will find drama in your MEG2 drama section, you will find the drama or the plays of this period are also very much scientific. You find the Alchemist, or you find the Ben Jonsonian drama, or how man is created, every man in his humor, every man out of his humor. All those plays you will get, and in those plays you will very much find that how that those ideas are there. So dear learners, um, apart from the scientific development of that age, there was another factor which were very much responsible for creating such type of metaphysical poetry. That is the philosophical speculations. As I told you, that it was an age when there was the development of, or there and there was the upheavals of, there was the growth of scientific, philosophical, religious, all types of knowledge in the mind of the people in the society. So two philosophers I will particularly refer to. The philosophers were one is Thomas Hobbes, Thomas, Thomas, Hobbes, Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes. His life is from 1588 to 1679. Thomas Hobbes. He was an English philosopher, and another philosopher, that was John Locke, John, John, Locke, John Locke, and his life is from 1632 to 1704. So these two philosophers, the eminent philosophers, and John Locke was also a physician. He was a doctor. So along with the scientific knowledge, they were also the masters of philosophy. They were very much eminent scientific thinkers of the age. They thought life in a very different way, because I'm just giving their ideas were scientific to regard mind as simply another body in motion. So what was their thought? Let me explain you that Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, because they were both scientific thinkers, then they very much explain that human being, or what we call self of a human being, is not simply a physical entity. The physical entity, or the physical existence of a human being is also accommodated with a mind. So what is our mind? So the mind, if you look at our mind, that if you say my mind is the mind, then physically speaking, scientifically speaking, mind is a stuff. It is what we call a brain in the medical term. But so the brain is a stuff. If we dissect someone's brain, if someone is facing with an accident, the brain is coming out from the skull, then what we find? It is a kind of stuff. But when a human being is living, that stuff of brain is everything. Because when you prick on my body, or when I feel some pain in my body, the mind is affected. So the mind is very much a part of our body, and the mind is, as I said, the mind is another body. I mean, they divided the person, they divided the identity of a person, they divided the self of a person into two sections. One is the mind, another is the body. But if there is no body, the mind, when we die, when the body dies, the mind is defunct. So when you are alive, the mind is working. So mind is another body, and the mind works for the body, and the mind is affected by the body. When I am having a cut on my body, the mind is troubled, the mind is getting the pain, the body, and because the mind is there, the body feels the pain. So this is the scientific combination, that is the mind with psychic response of a body with the physical activities of it. So when
Sir,
yes,
one second,
yes,
explain please these things.
which one?
Now, whatever you explain that about the Thomas Hobbes and John Locke.
John Locke. Okay. So Thomas Locke and John Locke, they were basically eminent scientific thinkers. So as I told you, and science means the empirical science. You have to prove, you have to experiment. So they scientific thinkers of the time, their ideas were very much scientific, and they regarded that mind is simply another body in motion. I mean, they found there are two components of a personality. There are two components of a person. What we call identity, or what we call self, SELF, self of a person. The self of a let me explain. The self of a person is both the combination of body and mind. The body is existing in the society. The body is existing in a situation, and the mind is a part of the body, because when a body dies, the mind cannot work. So this is the scientifically they explain. But at the same time, we find the scientifically mind means the brain stuff. But that brain stuff is not enough. That brain stuff has a software. The brain stuff is connected with some other psychological activities in the body. So when there is a cut on my body, then the brain feels it, and the brain gives the message to the body to feel it. So people are, or a human being can be hurt in two different ways. One is mentally, another is physically. So let us say I am physically hurt. You beat me, or you injure me, you attack me, you stab me. So when I feel the pain is felt by the body, but at the same time, the pain is felt by my mind. But when I am facing some depression, the depression is felt by my mind. It is not felt by it is not immediately felt by my body. But when I am continuously in the depression, then definitely my body will also be affected. So mind and body, they are complementary to each other. When mind is affected, body is affected. When body is affected, mind is affected. So in that kind of a situation, when a person is living in a society, so many factors are interrelated to him. When suppose I am living in a society, I am very much interactive to the society. from political point of view, from professional point of view, from domestic point of view, from economic point of view, from religious point of view, all that. So when sometimes what happens that we are unable to adjust, we are unable to accommodate to the situations in the society. In that case, our mind is affected and we become a very sorrowful figure. Despite everything, our mind is not getting any kind of satisfaction, as a result of which that our body is also affected. So what I am trying to say here is that a new kind of philosophy emerged in the society where the mind and body both were taken into consideration. In earlier philosophy, the mind was taken as the important thing. But in the philosophy of Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, the body was given equal importance because they said that body is more important than the mind because mind is a part of the body. And when the body dies, the mind gets defunct. When you are dead, what is the use of the mind? The mind is nothing. So body is more important. So when the body and when the body acts, when the body reacts, or when the body responds, or when the body responded by others, the mind acts accordingly. So this kind of a new scientific idea with philosophic touch is reflected in the poems of the metaphysical poets. We shall take some examples, and I will show you how they have used it. So these are some of the points that I discussed regarding the metaphysical group of poets. If you have any doubt, then you can ask me so that I can go to the next part.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Excuse me, sir. As you have told earlier, metaphysical poets, they are beyond the physical world.
Yes.
So how they countered the scientific experiment or these empirical?
Yes. Okay. So okay, let me make you clear that physical world, in that metaphysical, the term metaphysical and body related to the physical world, they are the meaning is different. You are not able to catch it that here physical world means ordinary world, ordinary thought, ordinary ideas, and the body or the scientific thought that we talk about body, I mean, suppose I am physically not well, that means the body is not well. So that is physical has different meanings. So one of the meanings is body, that I am physically not fit, means my body is not fit for that. But when I talk about metaphysical, so here physical does not mean body. Physical means the ordinary things that is happening in the society. So metaphysical group of poets that did not talk of the ordinary things. So let's say that body is also an ordinary thing. They gave importance to the body than the mind. So metaphysical group of poets wrote their poems regarding the body, not in the ordinary sense. They will use the forceful imagery of body. Take for example, I'm just giving one little example. The example is that if I take you to an example, let me take you so that your idea will be clear. That is yes. If please come to page number 57 of your book, you'll find a very interesting thing. What I'm trying to say here. 57 number page. 57.
Excuse me, sir. Kindly tell me the block number.
Block number 3.
Okay.
Block number 3. You see, I'm using that physical in the second sense, I mean the empirical sense, and physical in the metaphysical sense. In page number 56, at the end of the page, there is an example of conceit written by the major poet of the age, John Donne. I shall discuss it later on. But John Donne is writing a poem. The poem is The Flea, F-L-E-A, flea. And here flea means not the fly. Flea means it is referring to the mosquito. So he is writing a poem on the mosquito, a very ordinary insect. Okay, and how that ordinariness has been manipulated in the metaphysical vein as extraordinary, and that is the forceful use of, the hyperbolic use of image. Let me read the line for you. If you have got the text, you can refer to it. Page 56, last part. Me it stalked fast, and now stalks thee, and in this plea our two bloods mingled be. So the poet is telling here, me it is a medieval English. So me it stalk fast. I mean the mosquito fast bites me. Okay. So when the mosquito first bites me, then obviously it is sucking my blood. And now sucks thee. Now the mosquito is biting you. It sucks your blood. And in this plea, now in this mosquito, two bloods mingle be. Two bloods are combined. The two bloods are your blood and my blood. So when you look at these two lines, what do you find here? You find that the poet is definitely giving an imagery of anatomical science. Anatomy, the internal study of the body. So the mosquito is biting me fast. It is sucking the blood. Then the mosquito is biting you. It is sucking your blood. And where are the bloods going? The two bloods are going to the stomach of the mosquito. So the stomach, it is a kind of dissection, scientific analysis. And because of the empirical science, the effect of scientific knowledge, the poet is now saying this is extraordinary. And when the two bloods are going there, so the poet has an anatomical observation of the stomach of the mosquito. And he says, again in the page number 57, another two lines are there. Confess it, this cannot be said, a sin or shame or lose of maidenhead. So when your blood and my blood are combined in the cell of the stomach of the mosquito, then we are combined. We are united, and I find my love fulfilled there. And confess it. This cannot be said a sin, and it is not a sin. No one, but without marriage, without approval, if we are combined, then it will be considered as a sin, and it will be a shame for the society. It will be a shame for the culture. It will be a shame for you and me. And in that case, it will be a loss of our dignity. It is a loss. It will hamper our mannerism, our presentation of behavior, and also it will destroy your maidenhood. It will destroy your virginity. It will destroy your maidenhood. Nothing such has happened, but our unity has taken place. Our love has attained its maturity. So this kind of a forceful imagination you find in the metaphysical group of words. So here physical is a very ordinary thing. A mosquito is going, biting you, a mosquito is going, biting your beloved. So how you explain it in that manner, forcefully, then this is becoming extraordinary. So that is why it is metaphysical. So scientific knowledge is there, so it is physical, and it is beyond ordinary explanation. It is forceful use of the imagery. And an image is created in your mind, dear learners, because you are creating an image that the mosquito's stomach, the blood is going through the vein of the mosquito and all that. And in the page number 57, at the end, there is another small stanza relating to that. It is written here, this plea is you and I. This plea is you and this plea is I. I mean, the plea is the point of our unification. This plea is the point of our conglomeration, and this our marriage bed. So this is our honeymoon bed. So this is the imagination of the poet, how he's taking a very ordinary event to the height of extraordinary one. And marriage temple is, this is our marriage temple, though parents grudge. Our parents may not agree, our parents may express their grudge, but I am satisfied, I am well satisfied, and you are also satisfied, and we are met and cloistered in the living walls of Jet. And we are cloistered, we are so closely united, so we are so closely, intensely united that nothing can separate us. We are cloistered, we are almost united in the living walls of Jet. Look at the word, living walls of Jet. In the living walls, the living cells that is in the stomach of the mosquito, and the mosquito has been used. Mosquito has been addressed here with a metaphoric symbol, that is jet. So this jet word is very much scientific. So the knowledge of science is there, the experimental science is there, and the beyond the physical world is there, extraordinariness is there. So that is what is an example of conceit. Forceful, violently the idea is forceful explanation of the image. Is that clear? Is it clear or not? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It is clear. Yes, sir.
Okay. So that is why I gave you an example like this. You found the pages or not? You found the pages?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now I'm coming to the metaphysical poets, how they wrote and how they did it. So when you come to the metaphysical age, now when you come to the poets of those age, then we find the poets of the age into three
Sir,
sections. Yes.
I did not find it.
Any? Yes.
Sir, I did not find the pages.
Any doubt?
Yes, sir.
If you get it in page number 56 of book 3. Are you having book 3, unit 3?
Yes, sir.
In unit 3, page number 56.
Book 3.
Page number 56. Book 3.
Book 3. Okay, sir.
Page 56 and 57 I just discussed.
Okay,
A poem
sir.
written by John Donne, Metaphysical the Philly. I wanted to explain you what is conceit and how the scientific idea is there, and I just explained someone's query that how physical is used in two different terms. One is scientific, another is that is metaphysical, beyond the ordinary. Physical means ordinary also. Okay. So when we talk about the metaphysical group of poets, then they have been classified under three different sections, three different parts. One is the Spencerians. So you can see your page number 18, 1-8 of book 3 that we are discussing. Page number 18. 18 from page 18, 19, and some parts of 20, you will find the Spencerians. The first, in the metaphysical age, the first group is the Spencerians. Spencerians were actually not purely metaphysical. They were the followers of Spencer's tradition. So the Spencerian poets poet wrote in Spencer's style, and particularly made the deification of love. In page number 18, the name of the poets are there. One is Phineas Fletcher from 1582 to 1650. Another was in page number 19, Giles Fletcher, 1585 to 1623. Then another one is Wither, life is 1588, 66, and another one is William Brown. So these are the four poets who were actually not purely metaphysical group of poets, because they were continuing the tradition of Edmund Spencer. So what was the main point of Edmund Spencer, or a poetic vein of Edmund Spencer? We discussed in the previous class that Edmund Spencer was mainly emphasizing on the element of love, and he was deifying love. He was glorifying love, and when he is glorifying love, then as I told that how he gives importance to both physical love and spiritual love. So that trend continued in their poems. And I think because I don't have sufficient time, I cannot go to all the poems, but I can just give you the guidance that please read page number 18 and 19, and you may get a short note. The short note on these Spencerians. So these Spencerians are a group of poets belonging to the metaphysical age, but they were not purely metaphysical. They were the followers of Spencerian vein or Spencerian technique. And so what was the Spencerian technique? The Spencerian technique, in a very simple word, is the deification of love. D-E-I-F-I-C-A-T-I. Deity, you know, deity mana deva devi jo gaam ane kar thanti, deity. So I mean worshipping love. they are the worshipper of love. And as you know, love in Spencerian term is both the combination of physical love and spiritual love. So one, they are incomplete without that, and 4 poets are there, and they have written some. So you will get a short note. You will not get long question on the Spencerians. Only short note, maybe of 5 marks. Then the another group of poet that you find here in this group, the second group is the Cavalier poets. The Cavalier poets. The Cavalier poets are there in page number 20. You will find page number 20, the Cavalier poets. You can also get a short note. But when you are getting a question on the metaphysical group of poets, first of all, you give the historical background. Then you write about these 2 group of poets, that they were partly metaphysical, but they were mainly the followers of the earlier tradition. One is the Spencerians. You call them Spencerians. The Spencerians are 4 poets. They deified love, physical love and spiritual love, wrote in Spencerian style. Another group of poets, they are called the Cavalier poets. So the Cavalier group of poets, the Cavalier poets in page number 20, 21 and 22, 23, up to 25, it is there. You can Cavalier poets. Then the Cavalier poets were, why were they called Cavalier? Cavalier, because they were associated with the court of King Charles. And I already told you who was King Charles. King Charles I. King Charles I, because we shall discuss King Charles I in the next class also. So King Charles I was the son of King James. And King Charles I was also a man of aesthetic vision. He was giving much more importance to art, literature during his time. And these Cavalier group of poets, it is very interesting to see that this Cavalier group of poets are court poets. That is why they are called Cavalier poets. And they were the royalists. Royalist means during this time, during 17th century, during the time of Charles I, at the ending part, you will find there are 2 groups of people, and England was coming into a situation of political unrest. So these royalist poets, the court poets, they were
Sir,
sponsored by the king. Yes.
I did not found
Yes,
anything. Sir, I did not found anything.
Are you with book 3?
No, actually, sir, I have no any book study materials, but I got all this from the site.
Yes, but in the site it is there. I'm giving you the page numbers. You see the page numbers, it is very much there. Or if you are not finding, you just note down the page numbers, and later on you will find. Probably you are going to the wrong page, wrong book, because the page number is genuine. Yes.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, actually, in the PDF form, all 800 pages are given continuously. So she is being confused. Actually, I am telling unit 12 you open.
No.
Unit 12.
Oh, unit 12.
When-
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Oh, please guide her.
Okay.
So as we were discussing, the Cavalier group of poets, were associated with the court of King Charles I. King Charles I was a man with aesthetic vision, supporter of literature, supporter of art, and all that. But during the time of King Charles I, you will find a political unrest was emerging in English society. And that we shall find in our next class. But just for your knowledge, I am saying that there was the anti-royalist group, the anti-royal group, the anti-King Charles I group was led by a leader called Oliver Cromwell. You please remember the name, because in the next class I will use this name. Oliver Cromwell, Oliver, Oliver Cromwell, 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 Oliver Cromwell. So these Cavalier poets were sponsored by the king, but they were the supporters of Oliver Cromwell. And Oliver Cromwell was against the monarchic rule, Rajtantra, monarchic rule. Oliver Cromwell was instigating the people or convincing the people of a new form of government, that which democratic form of government, people's government. So there was a kind of political antagonism, political rivalry that has already started internally in the political scenario of England. So this Cavalier group of poets, they were externally showing them to be the supporter of the king, associated with the court of King Charles. So they are designated as Cavalier poets, but internally they were the supporters of Oliver Cromwell, who was the prime mover against the political rivalry of kingdom. So these Cavalier group of poets, they were also not exactly metaphysical. So their poems were a bit different from the metaphysical poets, because they, in their poem, we find the blending of, or the combination of the Johnsonian style as well as Donne style. So they were not 100% metaphysical, but they were metaphysical as well as they were Johnsonian. So let me tell you what is Johnsonian, because this Johnson is not Dr. Johnson. Because Dr. Johnson was a critic, and Dr. Johnson was not available during this 17th century period. Because I have told you at the beginning of my lecture today that Dr. Johnson was much later than the metaphysical period. After 150 years of metaphysical age, Dr. Johnson looked at the poem, then he wrote a book, then he coined the term metaphysical. But during this period, there was another dramatist which you may discuss in your MEG2, that is Ben Jonson. There are two Johnsons in literature. One is Ben Jonson, another is Dr. Johnson. So Ben Jonson's scientific theory was different. Johnsonian theory, what you say? So, Johnson has written two important drama, that is Every Man in His Humor, Every Man Out of His Humor. So what is that humor? Humor ordinarily we mean fun, enjoyment, majak. But in the term of Johnson, humor means the sense organs. So what we say in our Sanskrit Panchabhuta, we have 5 sense organs. So according to Johnsonian theory, a human body is made up of 5 organs, like air, water, sky, fire, etc., etc. So Johnson, in Johnsonian play or in Johnsonian theory, you will find the human beings, the human being's character, the mannerism of a human being is controlled by the presence of humor in the body of a person. Take for example, suppose I am a very cool person. I am a very cool and I am very sober one. That means my body, mind is also a part of the body according to this theory. So my body, all the 5 humors of which my body is made up of, all the 5 humors are not available in my body with 20%. It is not 20% into 5. There may be more or less percentage. There may be the deviation of percentage of each and every item. So if I am displaying a very cool and calm behavior, then the percentage of water in my body is more. That is why I am getting cool. Suppose I am an angry person. I am very much, my temper is very much violent, aggressive. Then the percentage of fire in my body is more. Humor of fire is more. So that is why in Johnsonian theory, in Johnsonian character, the element of humor is an important part. So when you look at the poems of the Cavalier group of poets, they made the combination of both these techniques, Johnsonian techniques and the Donne style. What is Donne style? Donne style is the use of conceit. I just discussed a poem, stanza of the poem with you. That is the plea. How forcefully they are using image, and what is their purpose? Their purpose to use conceit is to show their knowledge, that I am this knowledge, and let me display my knowledge, that let me expose my knowledge. So metaphysical poems are not they're less lyrical, but they are more intellectual through conceit. So the Cavalier group of poets also, they wanted to show that kind of a technology in their poem, but at the same time they were different from the metaphysical in the sense that they blended the element of Johnsonian idea, Ben Johnsonian idea. I think I have made you clear about two Johnsons. You must not be confused with these two Johnsons. One is Ben Jonson, another is Dr. Samuel Johnson. Dr. Samuel Johnson is the founder of the term metaphysical term. He is a critic, but Ben Jonson is a dramatist, and he has a theory, Johnsonian theory.
Sir Samuel Johnson is American poet.
Dr. Samuel Johnson is a critic. He has coined the term metaphysical, and
Yes,
Ben
yes.
Jonson is an English dramatist. In your MEG2, you will get him, English dramatist. So that English dramatist has a theory that is called Johnsonian theory. And in the Johnsonian theory, that humor comes. Humor means not fun. Humor means the 5 elements of which our body is made of, and how that imbalance of humor determines the character of a person that he has given in the play, in each play. So that theory is also there because science was empirical during that period. So in the Cavalier group of poets, we find three things are very important for the Cavalier group of poets. The first thing is that they were the court poets sponsored by King Charles I, but they were not supporting Charles I internally. They were the supporters of Oliver Cromwell, who was the revolutionary leader of the people of England against Charles I. And how that revolution will come to a situation that we shall discuss in our next class. Okay. And the third thing is that they were not 100% metaphysical. They were partly metaphysical and partly Johnsonian. So in their poems, we find the blending of combination of Johnsonian style and Donne style or metaphysical style, but the element of elegance and sophistication are tinged with naivety. They are very clever. They followed the technique of Johnson. They followed the technique of John Donne, but they. So if they follow both the technique, then what is their uniqueness? What is their specialty? So they wanted to show their specialty in the elegance of eloquence. Eloquence means the use of extraordinary, excellent word power. So they wanted to show their word power as their intellect. So they were a combination of these two, and the poets of this period were Robert Herrick, Thomas Carew, Sir John Suckling, Richard Lovelace. You will find them in from page number 22 to 24, probably. Yeah, no, from 20 to 24. They are very much there in your book 3. So please note down
Excuse me, sir.
text. Yes.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
That Cavalier poets also not 100% metaphysical.
No, they are not 100% metaphysical. They were the followers of metaphysical trend as well as Johnsonian style. And the Spencerians were not at all metaphysical. They were belong to metaphysical age, but they were not metaphysical. They were Spencerians, follower of Spencer. They continued the earlier tradition of Spencer. So these are the two other group of from which you may get short notes. But when you get a question on metaphysical age, then you must include these two group of poets at the beginning. Then you come to the metaphysical group of poets. Okay. Then the third group, the most important group that is for our discussion is the metaphysical poets. And the metaphysical poets are like Abraham Cowley, Henry Vaughan, and it is very much there in your letter part. From page number 44 onwards, you will find these names and you will find the chapters. So the metaphysical poets are, one is Abraham Cowley, okay, and another one is Henry Vaughan. Abraham Cowley is from 1618 to 67. Henry Vaughan, V-A-U-G-H-A-N Vaughan. Henry Vaughan is from 1622 to 1695. Richard Cresser is from 1612 to 1600, very short period of life, 1612 to 1649. Thomas Treheran from 1637 to 74.
Sir, first name what?
Yes.
First name, what do you say?
First one is Abraham Cowley, A-B-R-A-H-A-M, Abraham, C-O-W-L-E-Y, Abraham Cowley, 1618 to 1667. The second one is Henry Vaughan, H-E-N-R-Y, Henry, V-A-U-G-H-A-N, Vaughan. Henry Vaughan is from 1621 to 1695. Then third one is Richard Cresson.
Sir, which unit? Hello?
This is third unit.
Sir, which unit?
Third unit. From page number 48 onwards, 44 onwards you will get. Okay. All these names and their works. I am just giving you all this information in a nutshell because our time is not so available to us. So I am giving you just the names so that it will be easier for you to find the chapters. The third one is Richard Cresson. Richard Cresson is from 1612 to 1649. And another one is Thomas Traherin. Thomas, Thomas, Thomas Traherin. Traherene. Traherin. He is from 1637 to 1674. And next one is Andrew Marvell. Andrew Marvell. Andrew Marvell. Marvell. Andrew Marvell. Andrew Marvell is from 1621 to 1703. Then another one is George Herbert. George Herbert. Herbert. George Herbert is from 1593 to 1633. Okay. And the most important one, the pioneer of the metaphysical poets is John Donne. John Donne. John, John, Donne. He is the pioneer. He is the master of the age. John Donne is from 1593 to 1633. So, but when you are answering for the metaphysical poets, then I have already told you that you can incorporate the Spencerians in your introduction. You can incorporate the Cavalier poets at your introduction. And in this group of metaphysical poets, you must not ignore at least 3 poets. One is Abraham Cowley, another is Andrew Marvell, and obviously John Donne. The 3 poets must not be, they should be given importance, and a little bit more should be written about them, because when I talk about Abraham Cowley,
sir, again the names, sir.
Names are 3 poets, 3 important poets.
Abraham Cowley, John Donne.
John Donne, Andrew Marvell. Okay, Andrew Marvell, and to some extent George Herbert. But these 3 are important: Abraham Cowley, Andrew Marvell, and John Donne, and to some extent George Herbert. So why I gave you these names to be taken care of, because we have already used 2 other terms. One term is Spencerians, another term is Cavalier poets. And Abraham Cowley and Henry Vaughan, these 2 poets, they are also called the early Augustan poet. Early Augustan poet, because we shall come across Augustan group of poets in the latter part, but they are Augustan poets. But these 2 poets are from the metaphysical group. They are metaphysicals, but they are called early Augustan poet. Why?
Who were, sir?
Because Abraham Cowley and Henry Vaughan.
Okay, sir.
They are called early Augustan poet because let me tell you a little bit on Augustan. The word Augustan. The word Augustan has come from the word Augustus Caesar. You might have heard the name Augustus Caesar, the ruler of Rome. The ruler of Rome. Okay, in Greek civilization. So it is believed that it is recorded that Augustus Caesar did a lot of development for the people of Rome, for the city of Rome, or for the kingdom of Rome. It is recorded in the history that Augustus Caesar found Rome with bricks, bricks, but he left Rome with marbles. He found Rome with bricks, but he left Rome with marbles. Means the brick was converted into marble, because of his extraordinary caliber. In a very simple language, Augustus Caesar contributed his power for the extraordinary development of the Roman society. And from that historical record, the word Augustan has been brought to the English literature. So what is the meaning of Augustan now? Augustan means a kind of development that one can do for a particular field. So in this metaphysical group of poets, for the metaphysical poet, these are the two early poets. And these two early poets, they contributed their artistic ingenuity, they contributed their artistic intellect or literary intellect to such an extent that metaphysical poetry that developed into a standard or that developed into a height which was further carried away by the other poets like Richard Cresson, Thomas Clarin, Andrew Marvell, etc., etc. So they were called the early Augustans because the same technique, the extraordinary development technique, that was again found in the later group of poets that we shall not discuss now. But why are they called Augustan? That is because they contributed their artistic ingenuity or the intellectual ability so significantly that metaphysical poetry grew into a standard or grew into a height which was up to a mark for the articulation of literary flavor. So their poetry points to a change in flavor of order and decorum, both in literary, social, and empirical science. So they incorporated that literary, social, and empirical science with the highest flavor and definite order and with a highest craftsmanship of decorum. As a result of which, metaphysical poetry achieved a literary standard to be further maintained by, to be further carried by the other poets. So they are called early Augustans. Actually, in English literature, Augustan poets are other poets. We shall come to them in our later classes. But these two poets are called early Augustans. So, my dear learners, when you write about the metaphysical group of poets, you must not forget to mention these two poets as early Augustans. Now,
excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Good morning, sir. This is Sharmishta. I'm sorry to cut you in.
Okay.
I was just going through the question papers of 2019, and I saw that only extracts were given. So, would you be kind enough to let me know if this year also it would be given like extracts, or would it be like subjective questions based on ages?
Some questions are subjective, but some questions will be from extract. Were all the questions from extract?
Yes, sir. In 2019, I was looking at the question paper. If I'm not wrong, my friends can correct me. All the questions were extracts that were given from the poems.
All were extracts.
Yeah, yes, sir. If you look into 2019 question paper, I was a little confused about it.
But usually they give general questions.
Okay, sir. Then next class I would go through all the question papers from 15 to 19, and I'll come back, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, and when you come to Andrew Marvell, that some of the poems of Andrew Marvell, like To His Poem Stress, or Complaining for Death of Her Own, The Unfortunate Lover, The Garden. Here we find that Andrew Marvell again has he has taken the same technique of the metaphysical poets, but his emphasis on love is more on physical side than on the spiritual side. So he was in some aspects Spencerian, but he has incorporated his own metaphysical idea by giving more importance to physical aspect. And what is the reason? The reason is very clear. The reason is that because of the influence of the empirical science. But empirical science very much says that the body is more important than the mind, than the spirit, because all those things are there only when your body is there. Once your body is gone, once your body dies, then nothing has got any meaning. That is the reason for which you find in his poem stress. He is very much addressing his beloved for a union, and he's trying to I mean instigate. He's trying to give a kind of instigation or stimulation to his beloved to come to him and to have a union, and which will be a benefit for the society, because they would fulfill their social responsibility by begetting or by procreating the next generation. So this is somehow Spencerian, but at the same time, the Spencerian does not ignore the spiritual side, but he is very much asking the beloved for that, forgetting that they are not married. But Spencer never allows for the combination without marriage. So in the poem of Andrew Marvell, you find there is a combination of both the divine and human love, but he is emphasizing more on human love, and he is giving secondary importance to the divine love. And George Herbert, one more point I had told you, George Herbert, whose poems are very lucid, they are explanatory, but they are very much inspired by the Christian thought or Roman Catholic thought. So among all the metaphysical poets, you will find George Herbert is a religious metaphysical poet. I mean, he is more religious than than scientific. So that is one of the uniqueness in Herbert's poem. That is why I told you that George Herbert should be also included. His poems are more divine. He is, you see, the difference between Andrew Marvell and George Herbert is that Andrew Marvell, when he emphasizes on human love then divine, George Herbert love poems are not at all between the man and the woman. His love is between the man and the God. Love between man and the God. So he explains the divine love between man and God in his own way, of course, by taking some metaphysical techniques. But the pioneer of the group, the most important part of the group, that is John Donne, his poems are unique because his poems are categorized into four distinct varieties. That is satire, as I told you in the previous class, satire for the amendment of Hysocien's Folly, satire poems, elegies written on the death, and songs and sonnets. Sonnets are there, and his sonnets are Petrarchan sonnets, 8 plus 6, 14 lines poem, Petrarchan model, sonnets, and divine poems. So he has touched all categories. He has touched satire, political affairs. He has touched elegies, the spiritual affairs. He has touched the sonnets, love, and he has touched the divine poems. And in all these poems, you will find one example I gave you, the plea. The plea is a poem from Songs and Sonnets. He is giving very much more emphasis on the conceit. And the conceit of John Donne is so forceful that he has such a searching mind with a very extraordinary capability for the living and the distinguished world, with his with his extraordinary, with his majestic source of investigation or exploration. So one example that I gave you in the poem, the Benediction, Forbidden Mourning, or the Twickenham Garden, the Good Morrow, the Ecstasy, the Canonization, a Nocturnal Open St. Louis Day, Better My Heart, the Three Persons God, Hymn to God the Father. In all the poems, you will find that the height of metaphysical poetry is finding its dignity in the poems of John Donne. If I take you to one of the pages of the book, then one conceit I gave you the example, but if I take you to one of the poems, you will very much find the use of that Donne's quality, that is here in the poem, that is the poem is let me see the page. The flea I told you, yes. In page number 52, we have an example from his poem, that is the poem is The Sun Rising. You see, in page number 52, book 3, I'm just saying how dawn's quality is definitely super. That is, Be old full unruly sun, where dost thou thus through windows and through curtains call on us? Question mark. Must to thy motions lover seasons run? Question. Saucy pedantic wretch, go chide, late school boys and sore apprentices. If you look at the poem, the poet is very much getting irritated, getting disgusted with the sun when the sun is rising. Because when the sun is rising and its ray is falling on the curtain in his bedroom, then it is disturbing the sleep of the poet with his wife, obviously his beloved. So here, the poet is scolding the sun. Busy, old, full. Look at the 3 words. The poet is using 3 adjectives for the sun. One is busy, one is old, one is full. So, when you say the sun busy, then it is an old and foolish idea, because during the time of 17th century, the geocentric idea of our solar system has been changed into heliocentric. So if it is heliocentric, then sun is fixed, earth is moving. But if you believe that, if you say that sun is moving, how can sun be busy? Sun cannot be busy because sun is fixed at its own place. But when you say sun is busy, then you are saying something old, you are saying something foolish. So at the very beginning of the poem, John Donne is very much rejecting or discarding the earlier theory, the earlier Ptolemaic theory of geocentric idea, and he is saying it old and full. If you say that sun is busy, because every day the ray of the sun falls on the curtain and it disturbs the poet and his wife to get up, and it disturbs them from their amorous art of staying together or sleeping together. So the poet is very much giving the new scientific theory by using the word old and full. So unruly sun. Why is the sun unruly? Because the sun is an intruder. The sun is a trespasser to disturb his amorous world of sleeping together with the beloved. Why dost thou thus through windows and through curtains call on us? Question mark. Why you visit us every day? Then there is a question mark. That means you don't call on us. You cannot, because you do not have the motion to visit. You do not have the movement to call on us. There is a question mark because you are fixed there. So here, if you analyze the poem in that way, must to thy emotions lover season run. You are important. You are important because you are there for which the earth is moving and the seasons are changing and spring comes and we enjoy in the spring. Lover seasons run. We get a season spring. The lovers enjoy spring. But your sun ray or your visit in the place is old and it is foolish idea and you are an unreal one. If I believe the earlier old ideas or the Ptolemaic system. So when you discuss this is an image. This is an image. And in this image, you will find the sun has been considered as an outdated object. If it is considered as BG, the very particular or BG, it makes the whole difference in the poem. And this is what is the concept. So what is the poet is saying? Please don't disturb us. If at all you move, if at all you come, then you don't disturb us. You go and you chide. You rise. Whom? The late school boys. The school boys who are getting late. You go towards them. You rise them. You get off them. You go to the sore apprentices. the amateur apprentices, the skillful, the immature mechanics or the apprentices who are to go to their working place. You go and chide them. You go and rise them. So these are some of the example of conceit we find in Don's. That is why Don is always a great. So my dear learners, to understand a metaphysical poem, it is very important for you to understand the background of the age and how they are reflected in the conceits. So this is about some of the ideas regarding metaphysical poems. And your book 3, you will find some poems are given to you, and the paragraph, the stanzas are given, and explanation is available there. So you can go through them, because question may come exclusively from any poem. So while any metaphysical question from any metaphysical age is coming, please give the historical importance of the age, the impact of the age, and how it influenced the poets, and what is their specialty, to which group they belong, and how did they use it. Always give some examples of conceits. So that is all. If you have any doubt, you can ask. Any doubt?
Excuse me, sir.
Sir,
yes.
Sir, actually, we have considered a lot in this, like scientific invention, science. But sir, there's also print culture was invented in 15th century, 16th century, and
in the previous class I told you, printing machine was already invented.
Yes, sir. That was also had a great impact on that.
But the printing part we discussed in the Spencer's time. So I did not feel it to repeat here. So what was the newness in the 17th century, that I told you. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I was looked the IGNOU site, and I was search assignment question, but I did not get, sir. But which session we have to download the question? That from 2019 to 2020 or 2020 to 2021?
Any learner is there who can clear his doubt? Is there any learner who can clear his doubt?
Sir, it's clearly mentioned that we are joined for January 2020 session.
Okay.
So we have to do the questions which is from 2019 to January 2020 session.
I think that is you are telling the.
Okay, January 2019 to 2021.
January 2020 session. You have joined. We all are joined through January 2020 session.
Excuse me, sir. There was not any question not mentioned January 2019. July.
No. It is actually from 19 July 2019 to January 2020 session. The questions will be for these batches only, and we are joined. We all are joined in the batch of January 2020 session. So I guess we all have to do that part, and those who will join on June or in June session, they will do the other question which was mentioned.
So I have to download the July session question.
Yeah, you have to download and write it and send it.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
July session I have to download, na?
Yes.
No, not. It's actually the July 2020 to 2021. We don't have to do that. We have to do the questions which are there for January 2020 session. It is from 19 July to 2020 January. It is mentioned clearly mentioned there.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hello, Panigrahi sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I have a question. This is Sharmishta again. I was going through the blogs. I had a question. What's the difference between ballad and elegy? I couldn't get it.
Okay. Elegy is a poem written on the death of someone. Okay. But ballad is a descriptive poem of a story, narrative poem of a story. It is a popular story narrated in the form of a verse.
So is it like the folk songs? Ballads are like the folk songs.
No. Folk ballads are there. Folk ballads are there.
Okay.
Folk ballads are there. But there are some other elements also That we can discuss
Okay,
later
okay.
on.
So I get the
Okay.
I get the very basic difference. So another one, irony and allegory. How are they different?
Allegory. Allegory
Yeah.
is a poem having double meaning. Double
Okay,
meaning.
and irony in that situation also we are insinuating about something else, but we are actually speaking something else, right?
Yes. Contrast between what you speak and what you intend.
So how is irony different from allegory?
Okay. Allegory is in one sentence you cannot make allegory, but in a single sentence you can use irony.
Okay,
Allegory
fine.
is
Actually, sir,
allegory.
excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, allegory is a description something by another, parallel meaning.
Yes, yes. Under the cover of another. So there is a parallel meaning. Two parallel meaning will be running together.
And irony
Sir,
means
actually-
intended different, intended meaning and descriptive meaning that they are different.
Totally contrast.
Sir, actually in our class 10th, I
Totally
guess it
contrast.
all mentioned in one chapter. That chapter is the letter to God. It was all mentioned. The irony, that allegory, similarly metaphor, all are mentioned in that chapter. When Lenko writes the letter to God.
Okay, may I
Everyone
refer
must have read that.
to I am giving the name of a book. If you find you get it. The name of the book is Glossary to the Literary Terms. The name
Yeah,
of
we
the
had
book
it
is
in our graduation, I suppose.
Glossary to the Literary Term by M.H. Abram. In that
Yeah,
book,
yeah.
everything is there. Very clearly, it is mentioned there. You can have, or you can download it also. I think it is available in the
Yes,
website also.
I have it, sir.
Yeah. You just go through it once again, and otherwise you ask me. Okay.
Yeah, black one, right?
Yeah.
The author was the
M.H. Abraham.
okay, sir.
M.H. Abraham.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Okay, learners. Then we shall meet again tomorrow at that time. Till then, goodbye.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Have a good day.
Thank you, sir.
Good day, sir.
Well,
Thank you, sir.
okay,
Thank
good day.
you
Good
very
day.
much.
Good day, sir.